Have you ever wondered what people consider an emergency? You might think calling 911 is reserved for life or death situations, but not in these cases. From runaway pets to outrageous food complaints, some of these reasons will leave you scratching your head. Let's dive into the 101 most absurd reasons people have called 911 in the US. 1. A man called 911 to complain that his pet parrot was shouting insults at him and wouldn't stop. He claimed the bird was ruining his day and demanded the police talk some sense into it. The dispatcher had to explain that parrot therapy wasn't part of their job description. 2. A woman once dialed 911 because she thought the moon was following her car. She was genuinely scared and wanted the police to investigate. The dispatcher patiently explained how the moon appears to move when driving. 3. One man reported that his house was being haunted. He insisted that the ghost in question was moving his furniture and eating his snacks. When police arrived, they discovered his roommate had simply been pulling pranks on him. 4. A frustrated dog owner called emergency services because their dog had eaten the TV remote and wouldn't give it back. They genuinely wanted to know if 911 could help retrieve it, as if officers carry secret dog treat tools for this exact scenario. 5. Someone called to ask if they could drive in the carpool lane while transporting a mannequin. They claimed the mannequin was wearing a hat, so it technically counted as a passenger. The dispatcher had to clarify that hats don't change the rules. 6. A man once called 911 because he was stuck in his own driveway. It wasn't snow or ice. It was because a family of geese had decided to block his car. He described the geese as dangerously territorial, though they left as soon as the officers arrived. 7. A woman dialed emergency services to complain that the Wi-Fi at her favorite cafe wasn't working. She demanded the police do something about her inability to scroll through social media. The dispatcher suggested she try another cafe. 8. A terrified caller once reported that there was a suspicious object in their front yard. When the police arrived, they found a Roomba that had somehow escaped from the neighbor's house. It was quietly sweeping leaves. 9. Someone panicked and called 911 because they couldn't figure out how to work their new universal remote control. They asked if an officer could swing by and program it for them. The dispatcher politely declined. 10. A man called to report that a squirrel was staring at him through his window in a threatening manner. He said he felt like the squirrel was up to something, though it turned out to be just another day in nature. 11. A caller once dialed 911 to report that their local pizzeria had refused to cut their pizza into the requested shape, a star. They claimed it was a violation of their rights as a paying customer. The pizzeria staff, however, didn't seem too concerned about the legal implications. 12. A man reported that his neighbor's lawn gnome was looking at him funny. He said it made him feel uncomfortable and insisted the police do something about it. The officers who responded suggested he look the other way. 13. A woman called to ask if it was illegal to eat ice cream while driving. She said she wanted to finish her sundae before it melted, but didn't want to risk getting arrested. The dispatcher assured her it wasn't a crime, though perhaps not the safest driving choice. 14. Someone once called to report a suspicious person walking through their neighborhood, only to realize mid-call that it was their own reflection in a store window. They apologized profusely, but not before officers were dispatched to investigate. 15. A man called 911 to ask how long he should grill his steak for medium rare. He explained that his wife had been nagging him about undercooking meat, and he wanted an official opinion. The dispatcher suggested looking up a recipe instead. 16. A caller reported that their cat had climbed a tree and wouldn't come down. But when the fire department arrived, the cat had already made its way down on its own and was casually lounging in the yard. The cat's owner, however, still wanted someone to talk to the cat about its behavior. 17. A frustrated shopper called emergency services because a vending machine ate their dollar bill. They said they wanted the police to arrest the vending machine for theft. Needless to say, this didn't result in an arrest or a refund. 18. A woman once called 911 to complain that her horoscope for the day had been completely inaccurate. She demanded to know if this was considered false advertising. The dispatcher patiently explained that 911 isn't in charge of zodiac disputes. 19. A man called to report that his roommate had eaten the last slice of pizza. He claimed this was an act of domestic injustice and wanted the police to mediate. The dispatcher suggested resolving the issue over a new pizza order. 20. A panicked driver called 911 to report that a UFO was hovering above the highway. It turned out to be a Goodyear blimp advertising a nearby sports event. The caller was understandably embarrassed, but thanked the officers for confirming they hadn't been abducted. 21st. A person called 911 because their cat had refused to get off their lap and they couldn't move. They claimed they were trapped and couldn't even go to the bathroom. The dispatcher had a little laugh and suggested the cat might just want some attention. 22. A woman dialed 911 to report that her goldfish looked sick. She asked if the police could recommend a good veterinarian. When told this wasn't an emergency, she replied, "It's an emergency for him." 23rd. A frustrated driver called 911 because the traffic light was stuck on red and they were running late. They asked if the police could come and fix it immediately. The dispatcher explained that this was an issue for traffic control, not emergency services. 24. A caller reported a hostile situation at their local library. The issue? A fellow patron refused to lower the volume on their headphones. The police did not intervene, but the librarian handled the situation diplomatically. 25. Someone once dialed 911 because they couldn't decide which movie to watch on Netflix. They asked the dispatcher to recommend something police-approved. The dispatcher joked that crime dramas might be a good choice. 26. Someone called 911 because their favorite pair of socks had mysteriously gone missing. They wanted to file a report of sock theft. The dispatcher, trying to keep a straight face, suggested checking the laundry room. 27th. A man called to report that his neighbor's Christmas lights were too bright. He described them as blinding and wanted officers to investigate whether they violated any brightness laws. Unfortunately for him, no such law existed. 28th. A teenager called 911 to ask if skipping school counted as a crime. They wanted to know if they could get arrested for taking a mental health day without permission. The dispatcher informed them it wasn't a police matter, but encouraged them to talk to their parents. 29th. A man once called because he felt his neighbor's garden gnome was watching him and giving him bad vibes. He was convinced the gnome was enchanted. Officers kindly assured him that garden decorations weren't under their jurisdiction. 30. A woman called to report that her neighbor's pet goat had escaped and was now grazing in her flower bed. She described the goat as ruthless and said it had destroyed her prize-winning tulips. Officers helped return the goat, though the flowers couldn't be saved. 31. A man once called 911 to report that his local grocery store had run out of his favorite brand of cereal. He claimed it was unacceptable and demanded that officers investigate. The dispatcher politely suggested trying another store. 32. A woman dialed 911 because she couldn't find her car in the parking lot. After officers arrived to help, they quickly located the vehicle, parked exactly where she had left it. Her excuse? "I was looking for a red car. I forgot mine is blue." 33. Someone called to complain that their neighbor's rooster was crowing too early in the morning. They asked if the police could issue the bird a noise complaint. Officers arrived but could do little more than suggest earplugs. 34. A panicked tourist called 911 because they couldn't figure out how to exit a revolving door at their hotel. They said they had been stuck going in circles for several minutes. By the time help arrived, they had already freed themselves. 35. A man once reported that his roommate was eating peanut butter straight out of the jar with his fingers. He claimed it was unsanitary and asked if police could intervene. The dispatcher had to clarify that this wasn't a criminal offense, just gross. 36. A woman called 911 to complain that her husband wouldn't let her control the TV remote. She wanted the police to settle the argument and give her the remote. The dispatcher suggested they try sharing, which wasn't the advice she wanted to hear. 37. A man dialed emergency services to report a suspicious package on his porch. When officers arrived, they discovered it was a delivery he had forgotten he ordered. His reaction? "Oh, right, my new shoes." 38. A caller once reported that their neighbor's dog was barking in perfect rhythm to a song playing on the radio. They found it unsettling and wanted the police to investigate whether it was a trained act. The dog? Just a coincidence. 39. A woman called 911 to report that her ice cream truck was driving too fast through the neighborhood. She claimed she couldn't catch up to buy a popsicle and wanted the driver ticketed. The dispatcher suggested waiting for its next round. 40. Someone called in distress, reporting that their cat had stolen their slice of pizza. They demanded to know if this counted as theft and if the police could retrieve their dinner. The cat, of course, showed no remorse. 41. A frustrated parent called 911 because their teenage son refused to clean his room. They asked if an officer could come over and teach him some discipline. The dispatcher gently reminded them that messy rooms weren't a police matter. 42nd. A man reported that his neighbor had planted a tree too close to his fence. He claimed the tree was invading his personal space and wanted officers to make the neighbor relocate it. The police explained this was a civil matter. 43. Someone called 911 to complain that their favorite TV show had been canceled. They described it as emotionally devastating and demanded to know who was responsible. The dispatcher simply advised them to find a new series to watch. 44th. A woman dialed to report that her hairstylist had cut her bangs too short. She wanted to file a complaint, saying her life was ruined. The dispatcher sympathized but clarified this wasn't a police issue. 45. A man once called to report that a bird had pooped on his car windshield. He asked if officers could identify the culprit and issue a citation. The dispatcher humorously suggested a car wash instead. 46. Someone called emergency services because their neighbors were playing loud music during their yoga session. They claimed it was disrupting their inner peace and demanded intervention. The dispatcher suggested noise-canceling headphones. 47th. A woman called to ask if she could use pepper spray on a raccoon that kept raiding her trash cans. She wanted to know if it would be considered self-defense. The dispatcher strongly advised against it. 48th. A man reported that his roommate had eaten all the marshmallows out of the cereal box. He claimed this was outrageous behavior and wanted the police to mediate. The dispatcher simply suggested buying a separate box. 49. Someone called in tears because they accidentally deleted their favorite video game save file. They wanted to know if the police could help restore it. Unfortunately for them, 911 doesn't handle tech support. 50. A person once called emergency services to report that their favorite sports team was losing a game, and they felt it was unfair. They wanted the police to intervene and ensure a win. The dispatcher gently suggested watching the next game instead. 51. A man reported that his coworker had taken the last donut from the break room. He described this as office theft and wanted the police to investigate. The dispatcher suggested bringing in his own snacks. 52. A person called 911 because they couldn't remember their computer password and wanted to know if the police could retrieve it. The dispatcher reminded them that forgetting passwords isn't a public safety issue. 53rd. A man once called to complain that the coffee shop barista spelled his name wrong on the cup. He insisted this was disrespectful and asked if the police could issue a warning. The dispatcher suggested he simply correct them next time. 54th. A woman reported that her neighbor's tree branches were dropping leaves into her yard. She claimed this was a violation of property boundaries and wanted the police to take action. The officers recommended a rake instead. 55. Someone called to report that their pet hamster had escaped its cage. They wanted to know if the police could help search for it. The dispatcher advised them to try looking under the couch first. 56. A man called 911 to report that his car's air conditioning wasn't working properly and wanted to know if police could help him fix it. The dispatcher politely explained that fixing a car's AC wasn't quite in their job description. 57. A woman called 911 because her neighbor's Christmas lights were so bright she couldn't sleep. She requested an officer come over to dim them down a bit. The dispatcher calmly told her the police couldn't help with holiday decorations. 58. A person dialed emergency services because their phone battery was dying and they couldn't find their charger. They asked if the police could find it for them. The dispatcher suggested asking a friend or looking in the car for the charger. 59. A man called because a squirrel had stolen his sandwich from his picnic table. He wanted to know if the squirrel could be arrested for theft. The dispatcher responded by suggesting he make another sandwich. 60. A man once called to complain that his Uber driver wouldn't stop at a fast food restaurant on the way to his destination. He wanted the police to order the driver to get him a burger. The dispatcher kindly suggested he take it up with Uber support. 61. A woman dialed 911 because she believed a raccoon was staring at her menacingly from her yard. She claimed it was plotting something and wanted the police to investigate. The dispatcher suggested she simply let it enjoy its evening. 62. A man called to report that his new shoes were causing blisters, and he wanted to know if he could file a report against the shoe manufacturer. The dispatcher informed him that shoes don't come with warranties for personal discomfort. 63. A man called 911 because he was afraid of the dark and wanted an officer to stand guard outside his house until morning. The dispatcher advised him to turn on a light and assured him he was safe. 64. A man reported his neighbor for hanging up Christmas lights too early in the season. He argued it was unlawful decoration and wanted police to enforce a seasonal schedule. The dispatcher reminded him that holiday spirit isn't regulated by law. 65. A person called 911 because their Wi-Fi was down and they couldn't get a signal. They wanted the police to help them get the internet back up. The dispatcher advised them to contact their internet service provider instead. 66. A woman dialed emergency services to report that her children were fighting over the TV remote, and she wanted police to sort them out. The dispatcher suggested she try a timeout instead of involving the authorities. 67. A man once called 911 because his cat had knocked over a vase. He claimed the cat had vandalized his house and asked if the police could take action. The dispatcher suggested a trip to the pet store for a new vase. 68. Someone called to report that they were locked out of their house, but it wasn't an emergency, just a case of forgetting their keys. The dispatcher kindly told them they'd need to call a locksmith for help. 69. A woman called 911 because her ice cube tray had broken and she couldn't make ice for her drinks. She insisted that it was an emergency and needed immediate attention. The dispatcher recommended she buy a new tray or use ice from the freezer. 70. A man called to report that his neighbor's dog was too loud and barking incessantly at nothing. He was concerned that the dog might be a threat to the neighborhood and wanted the police to intervene. Officers arrived to find the dog peacefully napping inside. 71. A frustrated person called 911 because they couldn't figure out how to set the clock on their microwave. They wanted the dispatcher to walk them through it. The dispatcher explained that microwave clocks weren't a public safety issue. 72. A man once called 911 because he believed there was a ghost in his attic. He was convinced the eerie sounds coming from above were supernatural and wanted the police to investigate. The dispatcher gently suggested a professional pest control service instead. 73. A woman called 911 to report that her neighbor's fence was leaning over onto her side of the yard. She felt it was a violation of her property rights and demanded the police fix it. Officers told her that this was a civil matter that needed to be handled privately. 74. A person once called emergency services because they couldn't open a jar of pickles. They wanted the police to lend a hand. The dispatcher suggested asking a friend or using a rubber grip. 75. Someone dialed 911 to ask if they could legally eat their lunch while walking in a public park. They were worried that they might be breaking a law, and the dispatcher reassured them that eating lunch outside was not a crime. 76. A woman once called 911 to report that she had run out of milk and needed a quick refill. She wanted to know if the police could get her some milk. The dispatcher reminded her that milk was not exactly a law enforcement priority. 77. A woman reported her neighbor's wind chimes for being too cheerful. She felt they were disturbing her serious mood and wanted them removed. The dispatcher recommended discussing the issue with the neighbor instead. 78. A woman dialed to ask if the police could remove a spider from her bathroom. She said she couldn't use the facilities until it was gone. When officers arrived, they found the spider already dead, apparently from boredom. 79. A woman dialed emergency services because her coffee was too hot, and she accidentally burned her tongue. She asked if the police could help with her coffee-related injury. The dispatcher recommended some cold water and a trip to the nearest cafe. 80. A frustrated diner once called 911 because their waiter forgot to bring their side of ranch dressing. They insisted this was a major oversight and demanded police intervention. The dispatcher suggested simply asking the waiter again. 81. A caller once complained to 911 that they couldn't figure out how to change their phone's ringtone, and they were getting desperate. The dispatcher politely informed them that phone settings were best handled by tech support, not emergency services. 82. A woman dialed emergency services because her internet browser wouldn't load a website. She was so upset she demanded a police intervention, convinced it was a security breach. The dispatcher explained that 911 doesn't handle slow internet connections. 83. A man called 911 to ask if it was illegal to eat cereal for dinner. He wasn't sure if he was breaking any laws and wanted to be on the safe side. The dispatcher reassured him that his dinner choices were perfectly legal. 84. Someone called to ask if it was a crime to borrow their neighbor's Wi-Fi without asking. They wanted to avoid any legal trouble after noticing the signal was stronger than their own. The dispatcher advised them to stick to their own connection or ask for permission. 85. A woman once called 911 because she had lost her way while walking through the mall. She felt disoriented and needed help getting back to the entrance. The officers quickly assisted her, but they probably never expected a mall emergency to come their way. 86. A woman once reported that her favorite lipstick shade had been discontinued, and she felt it was a crime against beauty. She asked if the police could force the company to bring it back. The dispatcher gently explained that product availability wasn't a legal matter. 87. A woman called to report that her neighbor's lawn was too perfectly mowed and that it was unnatural. She claimed it was disturbing and wanted the police to investigate. The dispatcher reassured her that perfectly manicured lawns weren't a police issue. 88. Someone once dialed 911 because they had been locked out of their Facebook account. They were worried their personal data was at risk and needed immediate help. The dispatcher advised contacting Facebook's support team, not the police. 89. A man called because he believed someone had tampered with his lunch and his sandwich didn't taste right. He asked the police to investigate the possible sabotage. The dispatcher suggested asking his coworker if they had borrowed his mustard. 90. A woman once dialed emergency services because she had dropped a piece of candy on the floor and couldn't find it. She was afraid someone would step on it and ruin the whole room's vibe. The dispatcher kindly suggested she check under the couch. 91. A person called 911 because they were having trouble deciding which pizza toppings to choose. They were so stressed out about the decision that they requested the police step in and mediate. The dispatcher humorously told them to go with their gut. 92. A man once called to report that his car keys had disappeared from his kitchen counter. He believed someone had stolen them and wanted police to find the culprit. It turned out the keys had simply fallen behind the couch. 93. A woman dialed 911 to complain that her internet was running slow. She was desperate for a fast connection and asked if the police could fix her Wi-Fi. The dispatcher kindly informed her that slow internet wasn't a police matter. 94. Someone once called 911 because they were concerned their ice cream was melting too quickly. They wanted to know if the police could save it. The dispatcher gently suggested they eat it before it melted completely. 95. A man once reported to the police that his neighbor had been trimming their tree and making it look too perfect. He felt it was an invasion of his privacy and wanted the police to step in. The officers advised him to perhaps plant a tree of his own. 96. A woman called 911 to report that her favorite store was sold out of a special brand of toilet paper. She demanded that police make an emergency delivery. The dispatcher told her to check online or visit another store. 97. A person once dialed emergency services because they couldn't open their favorite bag of chips. They asked the dispatcher if police could come and help them get the bag open. The dispatcher chuckled and suggested trying scissors. 98. Someone called 911 because they couldn't figure out how to cook a frozen dinner in the microwave. They were too nervous to press the buttons and wanted the police to assist. The dispatcher explained that cooking wasn't within the scope of their duties. 99. A woman called 911 because her hairdryer stopped working mid-use and she couldn't go out in public without dry hair. She asked if the police could help her get it working. The dispatcher recommended checking the power outlet or trying a different appliance. 100. A man once dialed 911 because he had a bad dream and wanted to know if the police could check under the bed for any monsters. The dispatcher reassured him that there were no monsters in his area and advised him to go back to sleep. 101. And finally, a person called 911 because they were having a bad hair day and wanted the police to send a stylist. They claimed they couldn't go out looking like this and needed urgent help. The dispatcher, holding back laughter, gently reminded them that hairstyling is best left to professionals, not law enforcement. What do you think? Which one surprised you the most?